And okay, so you can just click accept to the recording if you want to, if you're consenting to the webinar being recorded. So as I was saying, please keep your microphones and cameras disabled to lessen the load on your bandwidth and preserve the event quality. And if you have any questions or concerns during the presentations, please leave them in the chat box, and we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentations to answer all of your questions. All right, so to get things started, I'd like to call on Mr. Suchira Suranga, a board member of the Sri Lankan Evaluation Association, and also the director for monitoring and evaluation of the Family Planning Association of Sri Lanka, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, Dorothy. And thank you, Dorothy. And I'm going to, on behalf of Sri Lanka Evaluation Association and all the partners, I warmly welcome all of you for the 21st webinar that's SLEvA and partners. All the partners are inviting. We are partner with for this webinar as well with Asia Pacific Evaluation Association and EvalYouth Asia, EvalYouth Sri Lanka, and Center for Evaluation of University of Jayewardenepura, and Center for Learning on Evaluation and Results, Clear, Angle for Africa, and also ABC Hub, and yeah. And I warmly welcome our speakers today. Our speakers, Ayabulela Dlakavu, Mr. Ayabulela Dlakavu, Monitoring and Evaluation Specialist from Center for Learning and Evaluation and Results, and Mr. Tebogo Fish. Ms. Tebogo Fish is Center for is a researcher from Center for Learning and Evaluation and Results, and also Mr. Mark Mulobi is the vice chair of EvalYouth Global Network, as well as the co-chair of African Evaluation, APEA Evaluation Network, YE Network. And today our topic is very important: the current state of African VOPEs and their operations and impact on national monitoring evaluation systems. As you all know, the VOPEs role is very, very important for the success of achievement of sustainable development goals. And VOPEs have a very vital role in different areas. One of which very, very important one is to strengthen the capacity of national evaluation systems. More importantly, the government and the other partners who are working at the national evaluation system. So today's topic is very, very important for all the VOPE members as well as all evaluation professionals to understand how good African VOPEs are working on their development, on developing their capacity of their each country, and as well as it is very important for all the evaluation professionals to share the learnings and also VOPE representatives to adapt whatever the good practices that they are practicing at their own countries in Africa. And therefore, so today very interesting topic as well as very important topic. So we expect very active participation from all of you, and we are here to learn from and share and exchange learning from with our speakers. So I invite Dorothy to continue the session. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Suranga, for that opening remark. So let's get it right on. So I'd like to introduce to you our speakers for this webinar. So first off, we have Mr. Ayabulela Dlakavu. He's a monitoring and evaluation technical specialist at the CLEAR Anglophone Africa and is currently a PhD candidate in political science and a keen analyst on public and foreign policy, international development, and international political economy. Next off, we have Ms. Tebogo Fish. She is a researcher at the Center for Learning on Evaluation and Results, Anglophone Africa as well, and holds a Master of Arts degree in Research Psychology. And her research interests are on development issues and M&E. And lastly, we have Mr. Mark Mulobi, the Vice Chair for EvalYouth Global Network and the Co-Chair of APEA YEE Network. He is also a core member of the IRIPE, an initiative for the professionalization of evaluation to promote quality, credible, and independent evidence for informed policy making. And he is also a MEL consultant for Digital Impact Alliance. So we have a very interesting set of speakers for this afternoon. So without further ado, Aya, Tebogo, and Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, May. Good day, everyone. So we are going to be presenting on the state of African VOPEs, the operational capacity and impact on national monitoring and evaluation systems. And I will be presenting the first part of the presentation, which will be findings from a research study conducted by CLEAR AA in collaboration with APEA. Okay, so just to give you a bit of background on this research study, so there are 39 national VOPEs in Africa that are affiliated with APEA. They have different sizes, form, and Aya, please go back to the previous slide, thank you. They have different sizes, form, and capacity. Their form and functionality of national VOPEs are shaped by local context, access to resources, organizational capacity, and leadership. So there has been growing interest in the work that African VOPEs are doing, and this is stimulated by interest in country-led evaluations and national evaluation capacity. However, how VOPEs work, the issues they face, and how the system works on the African continent is not well understood. Also, the value that VOPEs add to the development of M&E, their contribution to adaptive management and evidence-informed policymaking also remains inadequately defined. Therefore, the point of this project was to develop a discussion document to start a conversation about how the work of VOPEs in Africa can be better supported and strengthened. So the intention behind this study was not to map all national VOPEs on the African continent. It was to gain a better understanding of several VOPEs in different contexts and at different development levels in order to develop a support strategy. So our main data collection method was a desktop and literature review, and the analysis of this study was conducted on the following VOPEs. So it was the Zimbabwe Evaluation Association, Evaluation Society of Kenya, Uganda Evaluation Association, Tanzania Evaluation Association, Senegal Evaluation Association, Cameroon Development Evaluation Association, Zambia Monitoring and Evaluation Association, and the Ghana M&E Forum, as well as the Namibia Evaluation Association, which is still in its formative stage. Then we also had informant interviews with 3 of the VOPEs within the sample. These VOPEs were purposively selected from English-speaking countries within which CLEAR AA works, as well as by the suggestion of APEA to French-speaking country VOPEs as well. Then we had a validation workshop that was attended by 27 participants to validate our findings and add greater insight. That was attended by 15 representatives of VOPEs, as well as 10 partner organizations, and as well as some government departments. Okay, so with regards to their form and capacity, all VOPEs are not-for-profit member-based organizations. So for an organization to become a VOPE, they have to meet minimum criteria. This includes having a written constitution that governs the affairs of the association, having an elected board that's democratically elected by the membership, having written bylaws that are endorsed by the members, and presenting the status of the conduct of the association at an AGM. Most VOPEs do not have paid staff, but rely on the support of volunteers. Those that do have paid staff normally have fewer than 5 staff members. Also, what we found is that VOPEs do not require monitoring and evaluation training for people to become members. This is because their membership is not limited to evaluators, but also commissioners and users of evaluation and those that build the field of evaluation. And then with regards to their functions, so with regards to the VOPEs that we had in our sample, we found that some of their key functions include building and strengthening member capacity. So the VOPEs consider one of their most important goals to be M&E capacity building. This is done through conferences, workshops, seminars, peer-to-peer training, niche training on specific methods, as well as developing educational programs in collaboration with local and foreign educational institutions. So for example, ZIA has provided SPSS training to its members. GMEF has provided training on data collection, analysis, and visualization to its members as well as ZIA providing peer-to-peer exchanges between different VOPEs to share lessons. Then another key function is the professionalization of monitoring and evaluation. So in Africa, professionalization of evaluation is one of the key goals or objectives of the VOPEs that we reviewed. This involves development of evaluation guidelines, principles, standards, ethical codes of conduct, evaluation competencies, as well as these are key tools to developing evaluation capacity. For example, in 2012, UEA developed evaluation standards for Ghana. In 2020, APEA also developed evaluation standards. I think they're in the draft form for evaluations conducted in Africa. But what we found was that if you take a closer look at the activities implemented by VOPEs, you'll find that these VOPEs are more successful in the provision of capacity building than they are in the development of infrastructure to support professionalization, although there is activity within this area. Then another key function is promoting monitoring and evaluation evidence. So what we found is that some of the VOPEs in our study identify promoting evidence-informed policymaking as one of their key objectives. That includes TANIA, ZIA, UEA, and GMEF. And this work involves advocating for national monitoring and evaluation policies and systems, advocating for the use of evaluation evidence in policy development and implementation, advocating and supporting the development of implementation of national evaluation policies, specifically those that are equity focused and gender responsive, working in partnership with governments and parliaments towards establishment of national evaluation policies, as well as supporting parliaments to use M&E evidence. For example, with ZIA, they signed an MOU with the Parliament of Zimbabwe to support parliamentarians to use evidence in their oversight function. Thank you, Aya. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so with regards to partnerships, what we found was that national VOPEs in Africa work with governments. So they generally have formal partnerships with M&E ministries, such as in the case of TANIA, GMEF. There's also engagements with CSOs. This is not always formalized. They also work with parliaments. There's also work with development partners as well. For example, UNICEF country offices in training. They also receive support from regional development partners such as the AFDB. Then national VOPEs are affiliated with APEA and the IOCE. So despite the extensive work that African national VOPEs are doing, we did find potential areas of growth or identify potential areas of growth. And these included improving the quality of evaluation and supporting the development of context relevant evaluation theory and methods, sustained advocacy for the use of evidence in policy, transformational application and use of M&E evidence, as well as supporting research on monitoring and evaluation and using their convening power beyond hosting conferences to engage with policy and development partners, not just M&E units. So even though these national VOPEs have a wide range of objectives. There are barriers or challenges to their ability to achieve those objectives. And these, what we found was that they are internal challenges or barriers within the VOPE themselves, as well as external barriers or environmental barriers. So these include discipline or profession related barriers. For example, in Africa, M&E is a new area in most countries. So this is not fully institutionalized, particularly evaluation, although this is changing. There's also a lack of investment in local capacity. So evaluation is mostly practiced by NGOs that are funded by international development agencies who generally use international experts. And then there's membership related barriers. So there's a lack of meaningful opportunities for local practitioners, a narrow pool of membership, a narrow pool of volunteers, and members and practitioners are not always formally trained in evaluation. Then there are also organizational related barriers to the objectives of VOPEs. These include limited financial resources. So VOPEs, national VOPEs generally rely on membership fees as well as sponsorships. They also rely on conference fees, also income that's generated from training. Although what we found is that they do not charge very much for the trainings in order to benefit as many people as possible. So therefore, they don't actually generate a lot of income for that. And then leadership deficiency. So even though leadership is a key determinant of success of a VOPE, when a leader just does change, a VOPE can struggle to adjust. So what we find is that VOPE chairpersons do not normally serve more than 2 years. So these changes can create a degree of volatility and instability, also because the changes in chairpersons are linked to changes often in management committees and boards. Then we also find that there's limited understanding within VOPEs themselves of their members' needs and interests. There's also logistical and administrative limitations. So what we find is that some VOPEs or national VOPEs do not have an administrator or a secretariat, and therefore board members or committees sometimes have to take over those roles and perform administrative functions, including reporting to donors, and therefore cannot focus on the strategic direction of the VOPE. Then we also have imprecise value proposition, and that is normally linked to the narrow pool of membership, because what we found is that VOPE membership has not grown significantly despite the growth of the M&E sector on the continent. And we also find that the number of potential members far exceeds the actual members of VOPEs. So this indicates that potential members do not see the value of signing up with these VOPEs. Then there are barriers that are related to partnerships. So we find that they can be a threat of co-optation by dominant parties. So while VOPEs do need partners, there's a high probability that the partners will have more capacity and more resources. So VOPEs may end up compromising their independence for the benefit of serving dominant partners. Sometimes dominant partners can also usurp the authority of a VOPE or divert their attention of the VOPE to serving their own purposes. Then there's also barriers related to the political arena. So what we find is that some of these VOPEs have limited political clout, and therefore their ability to influence policymakers and development practitioners remains restricted, and they have been less than successful in ensuring government accountability to its citizens, and have had limited success in shaping evaluation practice of development partners operating in their countries. So it is clear from our review that VOPEs, national VOPEs in Africa, remain an important element in their country's M&E ecosystem and enablers of national capacity development. They occupy a unique position in civil society and are able to be custodians of country M&E ecosystems, represent the collective needs of M&E professionals, support the building of M&E infrastructure within the public service, promote the use of M&E in public management, raise awareness about the importance of M&E within the broader public. However, capacity, technological, financial, and political barriers experienced by these national VOPEs are serious constraints. And this is where CLEAR AA, APEA, and other development partners can come in. Thank you so much. please note that the link to this paper will be shared in the chat box. Over to you, Aya. Thank you.
Thank you, Tebogo, and good afternoon, good day, and maybe good evening to some of the participants. So I'll basically be presenting on KA's position in relation to engagement. So evaluation capacity development initiatives as they relate to national evaluation systems, and more particularly for this session, our engagements with VOPEs. So I'll begin with KA's conceptualization of typical country national monitoring and evaluation ecosystem, sometimes known as a national monitoring and evaluation system, or even based on a preference, national evaluation system. So for the interest of time, I'll just name drop and focus specifically on the one where VOPEs fit in. So your first pillar of a typical country M&E ecosystem or country M&E system is basically the government-wide M&E system, which is probably the one that receives the most attention from evaluation capacity development stakeholders. So this is your government institutions like your ministries, departments, agencies. Sometimes you can even go to the subnational level and go into districts, counties, depending on the country's administrative system. The second pillar is parliament, which has a constitutional mandate to demand performance reporting as well as other forms of evidence from the executive. The third arm is essentially the political environment within which everything happens. And more broadly, the political environment is essentially constituted by the other pillars of the country M&E ecosystem. So the degree to which the political system is accountable, or it encourages accountability and transparency, will depend on the other pillars, and in terms of how they entrench the monitoring and evaluation activities within the fabric of governance or development planning, development programming, and the like. And then the fourth pillar, which is probably the subject of today, is the fourth estate of development, which includes development partners, civil society organizations, and higher education institutions. And for this particular session, we're looking at the role of voluntary organizations for professional evaluation within these national monitoring and evaluation systems, because they are very important as they help to entrench an ecosystem due to the roles they play, which I will elaborate on. So let me begin with the role that VOPEs play in national monitoring and evaluation systems, and I'll start with their three core aims. The first of which is to enhance the supply of capable monitoring and evaluation professionals. Because VOPEs, by their very nature, they are basically an umbrella body wherein monitoring and evaluation professionals club to sort of network as well as to sort of gain more capacity. Because one of the roles of VOPEs is to capacitate their membership. The second one is to create a favorable environment for M&E practice through the development of national evaluation guidelines, as Tebogo's presentation alluded. The third one is to advocate for systemic demand for monitoring and evaluation, because the thinking there is that it is pointless to have an oversupply of M&E without having the prerequisite demand to sort of met in evaluation economies. So VOPEs play a particularly important role, particularly in the canvassing or lobbying for the enactment of national evaluation policies. So the role of VOPEs within the SDG, or the Sustainable Development Agenda of the United Nations, of which many of the United Nations member states are signatories, is another avenue that further intensifies the importance of VOPEs within national evaluation economies or national evaluation systems. This is in particular when you zero in on SDG 17, which speaks to partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you want to delve even deeper, you'd have to focus on the 5 categories, specifically the one that speaks to capacity building, wherein VOPEs roles or functions are probably most amplified within SDG 17. So cognizant of this integral role of VOPEs within national monitoring and evaluation systems, CREA has adopted a clear evaluation capacity development strategy of sort of integrating VOPEs within their broader country monitoring and evaluation capacity development systems. So CREA has a flagship country program which tries to touch on all 4 of those pillars that I illustrated in the previous slide. And VOPEs have stood out as one of those focus areas that KAA is seeking to work on, more especially in terms of providing technical assistance to VOPEs so that they become visible and they make a positive impact on the national evaluation system and building a cadre of evaluation professionals, as well as ensuring that the broader environment is receptive towards monitoring and evaluation, as well as the evidence that emerges therefrom to sort of impact positive developmental outcomes. So this new approach means that country interventions are essentially encompassing of all the four vital pillars of a country M&E ecosystem. So this is basically the three-step process that KAA follows to provide this ECD technical assistance to VOPEs. The first is to create or undertake a diagnostic study. And that particular study is geared towards understanding the incumbent role of such a VOPE on national evaluation system. And once we have an understanding or the findings of that particular diagnostic study provides an understanding of the state of that VOPE in terms of playing a role in the wider M&E ecosystem, we then design an intervention, which is designed to sort of improve the communication and visibility of a particular VOPE, more especially in terms of getting the VOPE known amongst the key M&E networks in a particular country, so that whatever the VOPE starts to do in terms of M&E activities, such as establishing standard evaluation guidelines, those evaluation guidelines actually find a market wherein they will be used, instead of having a VOPE that doesn't have visibility, which makes any activities that VOPE is playing to become futile. And then the third step is to implement those particular interventions that we highlight in a strategy. And some of the VOPEs that we have worked with as clearly, the first was the Tanzania Evaluation Association, which became the flagship program of VOPEs of KAA. And since then, we have branched out to work with other VOPEs. Currently, we'll be working with the Malawi Evaluation Association in this regard. So the way forward with regards to our work on VOPEs is that we seek to integrate VOPEs within wider ECD interventions, so that we position national evaluation associations as co-agents of strengthening national evaluation capacities and national monitoring and evaluation ecosystems as a whole. So I will stop there and hand over to Mark Mulobi, who will be speaking on APEA network and its role in these VOPE activities in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I have the share rights, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Hope you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I know we are more likely to run out of time, so I'll skim through this work. We are going to publish it and we'll share with you all. So I'm here to talk about the perspective on VOPEs, especially here in Africa. And this talk is based on a research that I led last year through EvalYouth. We developed a toolkit to engage youth in VOPEs and VOPE leadership, for that matter. And we did it at EvalYouth, and it was sponsored by UNFPA. Yes, so in our research, we actually realized and found that less than 20% of VOPEs have youth, and majority of the VOPEs, they didn't have a year representation, especially even in their leadership. And we noted that in our research, that VOPEs, yes, to some extent, they are giving support to the youth. The general members, so they're also giving support to the youth. But the missing gap is we are not seeing youth in the leadership. And this is very pronounced, especially here in our continent. Again, we looked at the opportunities in our research and enabling factors that are facilitating youth to be in this board and in VOPEs. And one of the opportunities, we realized that youth are quite enthusiastic. As you can see, I'm very charming and smiling over here. Again, years are in large numbers. We are seeing, especially if I mention, like, as I lead the APEA year network, when we put out a call for a volunteer of something, we get over 500 volunteers. So we have many years, and I'm also seeing this the same in Asia, because I also work here in Asia with a number of people here. There are other strategic promotions, partnership with education institutions. For example, EvalYouth has partnered with Campus Learning Center, and it benefits even years here in Africa, where we get sponsorship for scholarships, and years are able to attend. Volunteering opportunities, years are quite active in voluntary work. And then the snowballing engagement technique that we are seeing, again, we see that as an opportunity. When you talk about enabling factors, it's collaboration, and I would mention here APEA and APEA year network. For example, we've been organizing the consultations in Africa for Eval for Action. Currently, we are in the process of developing an action plan for the whole of the continent. And in a more special way, I would also commend especially some of the partners that I'm seeing here. I'm seeing ASELA here. Through UNFPA, we are seeing these collaborations. And for example, APEA year network got a sponsorship from UNFPA, whereby 100 years will be sponsored to attend the APEA year conference. We have internal champions. Again, these are factors that enable years to, yes, I'm hearing some noise, increased focus on year engagement and opportunities for years to alleviate some of the volunteering burden on the members. I would mention this as when I started this voluntary work here at Kenya with my local VOPE called Evolution Society of Kenya. I was part of the team that actually developed the strategic plan for the VOPE. And again, we in our research, we looked at the challenges, and one of the pronounced challenges that we saw was the unclear career path into evaluation for years, especially that differing approaches for years to, when it comes to this space of evaluation, financial barriers, diversity of need and the experience of years, lack of confidence of years. Most of the years, they need that capacity building to be able to participate actively. And some of the interim factors that we are seeing was time and financial pressure for years, especially when you have competing priorities. Like myself, I'm here, I'm employed, I'm volunteering, and to strike that balance, that is one of the challenges that also, it's harboring years to participate, limited resources and tight budget for additional activities, lack of experience of years, and sometimes barrier. Again, we looked at ways on how VOPEs can attract years, and we had a few priorities. One is to increase e-membership, and this is, you find now that years cannot afford, we are seeing that, thank you. And again, making VOPEs accessible to years, providing opportunities for years. We had some spotlight tools that this can be used, developing a communication plan, running an evaluation competition, encouraging attendance to conferences like that, the one we are going to have here in Africa, facilitating evaluation. One of the biggest challenges that I would mention, especially when it comes to the African continent, that I'm seeing is that we are seeing most of the VOPEs working towards building their general profile in evaluation, and they are forgetting to engage years specifically. That is one of the biggest challenges that we are seeing. The second challenge is member VOPEs may not see benefits to engage the years, and especially here in Africa, as a lead and as I've engaged with many years across the board, years are not, they don't feel very accommodated because actually when you bring your ideas, you're actually seen as a threat and you're not accommodated. So that is one of our challenges that we're having. Again, we also looked at ways of engaging, you know, the years in VOPE activities now. We had a priority here. You identify the priorities of your target years, and then you collaborate with them strategically. I'm just going to skim through because of time. So we had a few spotlight tools that this can be used. The snowball engagement, providing internal opportunities and building capacities of the years. Some of the challenges here we are seeing is low capacity to cater a wide variety of needs and interests of the years, because you come and realize some years are looking for jobs, others are looking for, you know, that training to build on to what they already have. Then another challenge is proposed activities and resource and time intensive, and lack of motivation of the youth, especially when they feel they are not being welcomed in the VOPEs. And this is quite pronounced, especially in the continent. The other thing that we also looked at how to engage youth in VOPE operations now. And in this, we looked at promoting active engagement beyond youth-specific group. We're ensuring other groups and committees have access point for years, valuing the input of all members, encourage acceptance among members. And again, our spotlight tools here were organizing an award program, especially within VOPEs, and building year experience. Some of the challenges that we saw in this is low levels of participation of years, lack of confidence again, perception that operations of VOPEs require experienced evaluators. Again, this is very pronounced, especially here in the continent. You don't easily find years in the leadership because the notion is that they are less experienced, so they know little, not much, and the voluntary nature can lead to delays. And lastly, we also looked at how to engage youth now in the leadership, that we mentioned that this is our gap that we saw, especially in this research, that youth are not in the VOPE leadership. And
Mark, you have a minute.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will rush through as you are seeing on the screen, ensuring clear progression process. We have these spotlight tools running a mentorship program. And we had a few recommendations. One, to develop a year engagement plan. Two, formalize and publicize commitment to integrating years within VOPEs. And lastly, support the professional development of years. I know I've rushed too much, but I will be able to share these findings with all of you, and at EvalYouth level, we are going to publish this work. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Aya, Tebogo, and Mark. So if you have any questions for our three speakers, please put them down in the chat box. So we have about 15 minutes for a Q&A session. So first off, we have a comment, a question.
Excuse me,
earlier.
May, can you share the slides?
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me do that. Okay, so while I'm trying to share my slide, please write down your questions or comments in the chat box. All right, can you see my screen now? Okay, so first off, we got a comment earlier. This is directed to Tebogo. Marcella asked, what does it mean? What does context relevant evaluation mean? Tebogo, would you like to answer the question?
All right, thank you, May. Thank you for that question, Marcella. As a lot of you on this call would know, so there is the Made in Africa evaluation agenda that or debate that is currently going on within the M&E field on the African continent, and this is really about looking at developing an African approach to evaluation, decentralizing the previously Western approach to how evaluations were done on the continent. And this is because of the fact that things such as context and culture and history and so on actually have an impact on how on evaluations. Yes, so that is my understanding of context relevant, yes. So context relevant evaluation. So that's currently what is happening on the African continent. And I know Clear AA is actually doing a lot with regards to Made in Africa, the Made in Africa evaluation agenda, as well as other organizations, including APEA as well. I don't know, Aya, if you have anything to add with regards to this.
Aya, would you like to add?
So Tebogo has covered most of the points, but in terms of context-specific evaluations, some of the other approaches that have been adopted to sort of keep up with current trends in academia as well as evaluation practices to also try and entrench this whole phenomenon. It's relatively new, but it's essentially centered around gender responsive evaluation. So that is within the context of M&E scholarship that is advancing and trying to keep up with the times, because gender issues are quite mainstream in the 21st century. So that's another contextualization angle to add. But Tebogo has added the part on the Made in Africa evaluation paradigm, which is essentially sweeping the continent through scholarship, through various presentations at conferences. So I think that's one to look out for as well. I hope I've also added to the participant question, which is quite great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Aya and Tebogo. I think this there's a comment here that's related also to the earlier question. So from Eugenia, she's asking if you can comment on opportunities that VOPEs have or provide to its members in terms of practical application of evaluation knowledge, including like conducting different types of evaluation. Did you find anything related to this in your study?
Thank you so much, May. Sorry, I'm just reading through the question again.
Are there opportunities for both VOPEs to provide?
Yeah, so I think with our study, what we mostly found was more regarding the training opportunities that are available, and also issues relating to the fact that in Africa, on the continent, there are a lack of opportunities, unfortunately, for local practitioners, because of the fact that these, as I mentioned earlier, that evaluations conducted in African countries are generally done by NGOs or development organizations or agencies, and they normally use their own experts within their own organizations. And therefore, even if to some extent they do use local practitioners, it's not, for instance, at as core leaders of the evaluation. So that is definitely something that does need to be addressed, because we definitely need to make room for local practitioners, as they do, like with the previous question was asking, they do have a better understanding of the context. So that's an area that we really need to address. Thank you.
Thanks, Tebogo. Mark, would you like to comment as well, like in the case of YEEs? What are the opportunities for YEEs in the region in terms of trainings for capacity building?
Okay, thank you so much, May. I would say different VOPEs have different approaches to building the capacities of the years. I would mention, I've seen in Samia they do pretty well. They have, and I have just seen on the chat that they're organizing a hackathon. You come and realize other VOPEs like Evaluation Society of Kenya, whereby it gives opportunities to individuals, but not many. You may realize 1 or 2 or 3 would benefit, because also the opportunity, the capacity to give that is also limited. What I would do is to do a comparative analysis and talk a bit about Asia, especially in this context, because I've worked in Asia, I've worked with you guys, and the level of the capacity that you have, the level you are able to host winter schools. We are now working this now here in Africa, especially from a Freya network. We are working on this. But you find that most of the VOPEs within the continent here in Africa, they don't have that big capacity to organize, and they're not actually organized to that level to build up the capacities of the years. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mark, for that. There's a related question here from Maiduka, I think. Are there virtual resource hubs for YEEs in the African region? Maybe this is something related to like building their knowledge and skills as YEEs. Do they have access to any virtual hubs or knowledge management platforms, I guess?
At our Freya network, we have a communication hub that we are setting. It's not yet very formed because we are putting up leadership on cross, but I would mention that especially within the continent, we have courses, especially with the institutional bodies, that the local universities and colleges. Myself, I've done a master's degree here in Kenya, in one of our local universities here. So that ability to have these short courses and diplomas, it's available within the continent. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And I think Christine's comment in the chat box is also related to this. So Christine says most volunteer opportunities advertised request for YEEs to elaborate their experience in evaluation. So this criteria would possibly like limit them from the opportunities that are available, especially if they still have no experience and such about monitoring and evaluation. So can there be considerations for VOPEs to redefine questions regarding evaluation experience for YEEs? I think for another way to rephrase this question is that do you have probably Mark tips for VOPEs and how they can convince like the board of the VOPEs to engage YEEs in the board or in their activities, and how this can like redefine like the requirements for YEEs to participate in opportunities?
Yes, thank you. I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, we realize most of the African VOPEs, they work towards building their evaluation profile and actually forgetting to build the capacity, the profile of the years. I managed to do a baseline survey in one of our VOPEs here. And one of my recommendations was actually to lower, because you realize years don't enroll in the VOPEs, especially because of the membership fee is quite high. And that is one of the things, once that is lowered or they are able to be accommodated, you realize because they are willing, as I mentioned, they are quite charming and quite enthusiastic in this. So it's for our VOPEs to work towards even building activities that are tailored to the youth, to make the VOPE more attractive to the youth, because actually most of the VOPEs are not actually attractive to the youth. And so you realize when opportunities come, as Christine has mentioned, that's just a criteria to really cap who is going to get, because the opportunities are few and there are many people. So it's for our VOPEs to really now work towards making themselves appealing to the youth.
would you like to give like any good practices based on your experience with VOPEs and who have engaged YEEs in their
Yes.
in their network? To have any good practices that maybe our VOPEs who are attending here can also consider?
Oh, sure. Thank you. And I've picked most of my good practices from Asia, and I would mention, as it was mentioned, I'm part of the leadership of EvalYouth Global Network. We work with UNFPA, and they see us as partners. Yeah, we work with GIE, Global Evaluation Initiative, and they see us as partners. Here in the continent, we realize that YEEs are not seen as partners, are not seen as valuable stakeholders in VOPEs, especially who could contribute anything. They are seen as people who don't know much, and when you bring your ideas, the ideas are not quite, picked up. So one of the best practices is to actually have that welcoming and warm approach to YEEs and accommodate them when they make mistakes, have them on board. I like how when I sit in Asia and see how the senior seasoned evaluators, they actually don't contribute. They sit and watch the young people express themselves and grow. And that is one of the good practice I would commend most of our VOPEs here to pick up.
Okay, so another question we have here: how can we renew ourselves if we are not seeing YEEs as partners? Oh, that's a difficult question.
It's very difficult.
I guess this is again directed to you, Mark.
Steve, I know this is Steve from APEA. Yes, yes, I think all is not lost. That is one. We have hope, and YEEs are quite active. YEEs are able to do things on their own. I would mention that the consultation that has been done here in Africa for Eval for Action was actually carried by YEEs. So YEEs, we still have that energy, and all is not lost. There is hope.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So we have a comment here actually from Marcella. Young people are more excited about practice than policy. So one approach to engaging them is to work with them to develop evaluative thinking to guide their entrepreneurial efforts. Yes. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah. Anyone else has question? If not, I think, thank you so much for all of your questions and comments to our the presentations of our three speakers. And to end, so we have now come to the end of our webinar. So to give the closing remarks for our webinar, I'd like to call on Theleka Vijavira. She is a member of EvalYouth Sri Lanka chapter and is currently an undergraduate student from the University of Sri Jayewardenepura in Sri Lanka, majoring in economic studies. She also volunteers for the Asia Pacific Communication Hub. So Theleka, floor is yours.
Thank you, May. So am I audible?
Yes, you can hear you.
Hello, everyone. So this webinar was very informative and insightful. We learned about how African VOPs operate, how they engage YEs in their activities, and their impact on national monitoring and evaluation systems. So we would like to thank our speakers, Ayabulela Fish and Mark Mulobi, for conducting this very informative presentation on the current states of African VOPs, their operations, and the impact on national monitoring and evaluation systems. Further, we would like to thank our moderator, Dorothy Mae, co-leader of EvalYouth Asia, for doing an excellent job moderating and keeping the participants engaged during the webinar. Also, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to SLEvA for organizing this webinar series in collaboration with EvalYouth Sri Lanka, the Evaluation Community of India, Asia Pacific Evaluation Association, and Center for Evaluation, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka. And special thanks to the Center for Learning on Evaluation and Research, Africa, for joining hands with this webinar. In addition, we would like to thank Suchira Suranga, a board member of SLEvA, for giving the opening remarks. Also, we would like to thank SLEvA production team, Randika Dimat, Dulmini Chamatkara, Hasiti Samarasinghe, and Madhuka Lienagamage for doing an amazing job in managing the production of this webinar. Finally, we would like to thank our participants for taking part in this webinar and asking thoughtful questions. We hope you all were able to learn something new from this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tileka. So for those who are asking if they can get a copy of the PowerPoints and the papers, we will be sharing those with you through email. Okay, so just some quick announcements before we end. Next week, September 2, we will have the first consultation on the professionalization of evaluation organized by ERIPE. So we'd like to invite all of you to join us in this consultation next week. This is going to be a really interesting consultation to really talk about how do we professionalize evaluation. So September 2, 5:30 p.m. IST via Zoom. Please register to this seminar. And then we also have the next SLEvA webinar. We'd like to invite you as well on September 24th at 6:30 p.m. IST. The next webinar will be discussing about making community participation meaningful, lessons from Empower's COVID in Her Voice report. Wow, this is another very interesting topic for the webinar. So please register to that webinar as well for next month. And then lastly, we'd like to invite everyone to join the Eval for Action campaign to accelerate the achievement of sustainable development goals. So you can go to the website www.evalforaction.org to know more about how you can participate in this campaign. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, for participating and for joining us in this webinar. And with that, have a good day, everyone. Good evening, good night, and good morning to wherever you are. Thank you so much.